All right, everyone. What we'll do is we'll get started. We'll start nice and slowly. That way, we'll allow that kind of these additional minutes for individuals who did register to log in. So first and foremost, good morning to everyone, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day, and albeit during this very interesting public health time that we're all in together. So nonetheless, first and foremost, thank you for your time and your support. As far as in order to take steps forward, we might have to take a step back for a moment, and to do that, we can just do some little bit of housekeeping right here. Of course, everyone is encouraged, if you'd like, to share your video. Not mandatory, but if you'd like, the opportunity is there. During the session, we will have the opportunity to ask questions, and you can do so through the chat feature of Zoom. So when we have different topics of discussion, feel free to chime in, whether it be questions, overall comments. All of that is encouraged. And then finally, if you can't hear me right now, you see mouse moving, but you still can't hear at this moment, you can connect to the audio, whether that be through computer audio, whether that be through headphones. And of course, there is a dial-in option if you prefer to connect through the phone. So you'd be watching us on your computer screen, and you also have the opportunity to watch us on your phone if you rather prefer the audio that way. So we are all here today for an annual OWHC event called the Joan Burton Day of Learning. In a few moments, we'll actually detail the context of that, but to make a statement right now, this is an event that we always do in person. And thankfully, with the power of technology, we're still able to deliver this event virtually. And us being in the present moment right now is proof of that. The topic for this year is all about building sustainable workplace health programs. I'm sure a lot of you might have experienced with you start something, but then a year from then, the status might go downhill, might go uphill, albeit. But bottom line is starting sometimes isn't the same as maintaining momentum over time. And so that's what this session will help us to clarify. With our time together over the next 2 hours or so, this is what a agenda is going to look like. We do have a little bit of modifications to the agenda, which will be stated as we go. But you can see we'll start things off with first giving a background about the OWHC, very brief but very relevant. We'll then go into the healthy workplace model that the OWHC created and leverages, as well as, like we mentioned, give background context about the name of this event, the annual Joan Burton Day of Learning, and then our knowledge sharing through our speakers and through those discussions. And so if you're wondering, okay, OWHC, who are you? Who is this interesting organization? So the OWHC is a nonprofit that's fueled by a group of volunteers. And these are individuals from a number of different areas, a number of different expertise. And so we all come together strictly for passion, for the joy of sharing ideas. And so we do this to help, in a sense, to give back. Of course, in doing so, it helps us act as a voice across the province to facilitate all these awesome silos that might be happening. The OWC tries to help connect ideas, connect silos, and most of all, make a better outcome, not for them or they, but for all of us together. If you take one thing away from today, hopefully it is that the OWHC specifically tries to promote for a comprehensive approach to healthy and safe workplaces, which our healthy workplace model will explain. But to make a comment right now, it's this balance between not only the physical, not only the mental, but also what's easily overlooked, the psychosocial aspect of the workplace: physical, mental, psychosocial, to name a few. As far as specific goals, the OWHC tries to follow. All our efforts cater to these types of goals. You can see these listed below. Two to comment on, of course, are what we try to do is we do this to get on the agenda of Ontario government, which is where change can occur through policy. And then, of course, the golden question of every hour of the day is, how do you measure? How do you track? How do you monitor? Are things going up? Are things going down? Is it ROI? Is it VOI? It's trying to provide clarity around this area of the conversation. To share a little fun slide right here is that we, through our social media, especially over the last short while, we try to do our best to, like we said in the previous slide, act as a voice for others. So whether it be conducting podcast type interviews with individuals and helping get their voice out there, whether it be sharing through social media different campaigns that are going on in the province, whether it be sharing other organizations who are also in the healthy workplace space, sharing their work, whether it be showcasing our members and their work. You can see the OWHC truly is about, hey, how can we give back? How can we give voice? How can we share best practices? And to say, once again, not to find out who's winning, but to find out how we can create a better outcome for every single stakeholder involved. So win, 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 win thinking, not just win-win. To share some fun quantitative data with all of you through our, on the left you have our LinkedIn. For our LinkedIn, if you're curious, if you're the different areas of professions that are actually viewing our LinkedIn, you can see it's a range between business development individuals, human resources, but also community and social services. And then in addition, how our reach is, we are the Ontario Workplace Health Coalition, but through the demographics of our followers, as well as through who's viewing our website, which is what the Google Analytics represents, you can see even just from March, just with a few months, our work touches the world. And so what's amazing about that is what it will be explained next. Our healthy workplace model is helping to really spread this message across the world. So not only Ontario, not only Canada, but even the other areas. So with that said, we're now going to turn it over to one of our board members, Alan Smofsky, who is first going to explain a little bit of background about Joan Burton, and then share our healthy workplace model. So Alan, I'm going to facilitate this right now. Here we go, Alan. So when you're ready to speak, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thanks, Nathan, and good morning, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces and see some familiar names. So nice to have you. Several of you on the call knew Joan, but assuming that some of you knew her better than others, I'm going to read. This is a testimonial from Maureen Shaw, who was the former CEO of what used to be called IAPA back in the day, which kind of morphed into, well, I guess there have been a number of changes, so IAPA doesn't exist per se, but that's where Joan spent a lot of her career. So Joan was a leader, visionary, loving, kind, determined, focused, solid friend, as well as a great colleague. Many around the world will continue to be beneficiaries of her incredible work. Joan has been instrumental while at IAPA after her retirement in 2009. In the development, was the lead author that developed the WHO Healthy Workplace Framework. I'll speak about that in a little bit more about that in a moment. The WHO framework for healthy workplaces is still being used around the world today. And as Nathan said, we at the Ontario Workplace Health Coalition have used that model. We've slightly adapted it, and I'll speak to that in a moment. As recognition for her vision and leadership, Joan was presented with the Canadian Workplace Wellness Pioneer Award. I know that at least a couple of you on this call are also recipients of that award in recognition of outstanding contribution to the field of Canadian workplace wellness and to the understanding and practice of organizational health. Joan made us all look to the future, was ahead of the curve in her thinking and ability to action the thinking, making IAPA in Ontario a global leader in workplace mental health. She will be missed for all of that. Her legacy will continue. On a personal note, I knew Joan fairly well. Joan and I would get together for coffee every once in a while. We lived at opposite ends of the GTA, and we'd meet somewhere in the middle and spend a couple of hours just having a coffee or lunch, as the case may be, and just chatting about her work and my work when she became chair of OWHC. We chatted a little bit about that. I always enjoyed my time with her, in part because Joan was a leader. So within the occupational health and safety space, Joan was one of, at that time, one of the relatively few individuals, and I'm going back, I hate to say how many years I'm going back, but the better part of 20 years, where those of us who were involved, and again, several on the call were involved in sort of creating Canada's Healthy Workplace Week and trying to move the kind of comprehensive agenda for healthy workplaces ahead. We looked to health and safety, because health and safety at the time was by far the most established facet of healthy workplace. And so we looked to infiltrate, and we used that word deliberately, the health and safety movement, also at a time that the health and safety movement was looking to broaden its own perspective beyond the sort of safety and hard hat into that broader perspective of work culture and mental health and all of that. Joan was one of the relatively few individuals that we were able to identify and tap into at the time who got it. She wrote a book, she did her work. So she was a leader right from the get-go. I very much enjoyed my discussions with her, and she will definitely be missed. Nathan, next slide, please. So I've put up here the definition from the WHO. So each of the next few slides will have a definition. This is the overall definition of what the WHO referred to as workplace health. So you can see that there are four areas, and some of you who were involved in earlier healthy workplace work will remember the kind of triangle image that we used to have, right, where there were three facets to what was a healthy workplace in Canada, and we had occupational health and safety, we had work culture, and we had health and lifestyle practices. The WHO work that Joan led is the last bullet on this slide: ways of participating in the community to improve the health of workers, their families, and members of the community. And that was the first stake in the ground. So they called it organization social responsibility. In North American sort of corporate context, I sometimes prefer to call it CSR, or corporate social responsibility, but essentially the same thing. And I'll speak about that in a moment. So this was really pioneering work, and this goes back to around 2010. So it's about 10 years ago that this work was done. And of course, the other quadrants, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Nathan, next slide. So this is the model. And so what we at the OWHC did is we essentially took the work that the WHO did. We didn't really change the four quadrants. We kept the term organization social responsibility, but we layered on, and some of you familiar with sort of what used to be called TQM, total quality management, and continuous process improvement. We layered on the Plan, Do, Check, Act. And if you're not familiar with Plan, Do, Check, Act, Google it, and you'll see that it is very much associated with sort of best practices and continuous improvement. And so we basically said that we went a bit of a step beyond what the WHO did, and we said, well, we've got the model. We need to speak to the model, but the model needs to live. The model can't be static. And so, if you have a plan, do, check, act, it kind of layers on this continuous process of looking at something like this, improving it, modifying it, and so forth. Next slide, Nathan. So I'm going to speak briefly in the next few minutes to the four quadrants of the model. And this is just our way of expressing some of the elements that are important. These slides are not meant to be sort of an exhaustive list of everything that organizations should do within each of the quadrants. So again, you've got the definition from the WHO up at the top: physical work environment, structure, air, machinery, furniture, et cetera, et cetera. But we looked at it from two perspectives, and this is where a lot of organizations have they've done a good job with process elements, and there are lots of stories out there of organizations that developed the processes, they had the committees, they put the sort of systems in place, but they didn't have a healthy culture. And so there are stories. If I go back a number of years, Enron comes to mind, and others where things were swept under the rug. Some of you may remember the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago, and it was traced back to sort of slippage. So they had the processes in place, and it turned out that some of what could have happened was flagged, but it was swept under the rug. And so, if you're an employee and you come forward with an issue, and the issue is kind of poo-pooed by your superiors or what have you, are you going to come back a second time and report it? And that's exactly what happened. In the extreme, there are some well-documented cases, if you look at employee engagement research, where there were accidents, explosions, deaths, and it was traced back to that the culture wasn't healthy. So the processes that they had in place began to stagnate over time. And so what we're saying, in effect, is it's not enough to have a process. That's the starting point, but you need to have the culture elements that underpin it and support it. So we've put some examples of what we mean by that: assessing the impact of work culture on health and safety performance, supervision, workload, some of the old Martin Shane stuff around needing to have an appropriate balance between one's workload and one's control over one's work and things like that. Otherwise, things start to suffer over time. Nathan, next slide, please. So health and lifestyle practices. Again, you can read the definition from the WHO. I won't. You can read as well as I can. So I'll move on. So again, we've attempted to bucket some things here. So policy and resources are key, because in many cases organizations have launched wellness initiatives and haven't really had a policy around it. It was a one-off, and we've seen organizations build gyms and fund smoking cessation programs and do all kinds of things, not tied to any kind of organizational strategy, not necessarily measured, and no policy that necessarily and resources that necessarily support it. I think we've gotten a lot better at that in the healthy workplace movement, but we've still got a ways to go. So what we've said is health and lifestyle practices has typically been associated more in the kind of awareness and prevention space. We've looked at it as sort of a wellness thing. We've looked at it as prevention of chronic disease. And so some of the things, so we've said, okay, well, there's risk identification, and there are a number of ways of doing that. And then there's taking action to address some of the risks that we've identified. That's sort of the classic wellness, 101, if you will. But increasingly, we have seen, and some of this is a result of some very robust analytics tools that organizations now have access to, where they get much better data and a much better handle on the prevalence of chronic disease in their workplaces. And it's kind of like this, and forgive me for saying it this way, it's kind of like this oh crap moment. We didn't realize that we have so many employees who are, some of them may be off work, but many of them are at work, but they're suffering from a chronic illness. And so they're claiming more in benefits costs. They may be absent from work less. If you can connect with sort of employee engagement data, they're often less engaged because they're suffering from a chronic illness and so forth. So beyond awareness and prevention, we're saying disease management is something that needs to be looked at. And so, identification of disease present, or at least the high, at high risk for it, providing support, and support for those that have a chronic condition may need to be different, may need to be more robust if you look at best practices than what we would do in the prevention space. It's all on a continuum. The other comment I want to make is that I have seen in my work, and I've seen organizations who weren't necessarily into prevention. They, perhaps in a modest way, but disease management becomes more of a burning platform. It's kind of like disability management. You've got people who are off work, you've got people who are suffering, it's impacting productivity. So disease management may be a way of engaging organizations to actually practice prevention. And if you just simply put it on a continuum of kind of prevention over here and disease management over here, and then layer on the strategies. So that's in effect what we're saying. Don't do one without the other. Next slide. Organizational culture. Some of you will remember the earlier work done by the Martin Shames and Linda Duxbury's and Graham Lowe's and others. A lot of this work was actually Canadian led, and we should be proud of it. So organizational culture, as well as attitudes, values, beliefs, and daily practices in enterprise that affect physical well-being, physical and mental well-being of employees. And so we've put some examples of what we mean by this. And we've said, and right at the top, integrate the importance of employees into the organizational mission, vision, and strategy. Not just the words, but walk that talk. We've seen a lot of examples of organizations spending a lot of time on developing a mission, vision. We're all about our employees, etc. But then you don't see it in policy, and organizations don't necessarily walk this talk. And so we've given some examples of what we mean by that the policies need to be in place. Performance metrics. Do you measure managers on the health and well-being of their employees? And I know there's a lot of debate about that. And if you have any questions or comments on that, happy to take them a little bit later. So there's some elements there. Understanding employee drivers, attitudes, and perceptions. That comes back a little bit to the health and safety stuff that we were talking about. Work flexibility. Performance based on achievements versus hours worked. I don't know about you, but I know so many people who still look at hours worked as a metric. And yet, if you ask organizational leaders, most of them will say it's about getting the job done. It's about performance. And it should not be about hours worked. Now, old habits die hard. I think with COVID, we are learning about about getting work done in a very different way for many of us than we're used to. So I think this actually opens some interesting opportunities for us to actually look at how do we get the job done. And done in a way that leaves it up to the individual as much as possible to get it done. And hours worked are simply hours worked. I recognize that some jobs are more easily are more based perhaps on hours worked than others, but that's fine. Fair work conditions. Some of you will remember Martin Shane and the appropriate balance between, as I said before, work demand and control, effort versus reward, and things like that. And last but not least is including psychosocial support. And this, we're seeing a lot of this now in sort of benefits management, so that this becomes part of the underpinning and support for organizational culture that we need to provide in a robust way. Make the next slide, please. So last but not least is organization social responsibility, and this is the one that in some cases is the most difficult to connect, and yet has arguably the greatest opportunity for moving the healthy workplace agenda ahead. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So I'll read part of it: the activities in which an enterprise might engage, et cetera, et cetera. This factors that affect the physical health and safety, well-being, and workers of their families. If you think about that, this is about, if you think about what we in North America often call CSR, corporate social responsibility, we tend to think of that as an organization giving back to the broader community, right? Uh, Examples of Habitat for Humanity and CIBC Run for the Cure and all kinds of initiative. Scotiabank puts a lot of money into community hockey, and on and on and on and on and on the list goes. And CSR is very high on the agenda of most organizations, most leading organizations that I know. And the budgets that go with it, by the way, are not insignificant. And what we try to do in the healthy workplace space, in terms of getting budgetary support, is a grain of sand on the beach compared to what is often spent on CSR initiatives. So it's typically thought of as an organization giving back to the external community. It also plays very much into the environmental space around not polluting our waters, air, ground, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the research and you think about what the WHO said, they also said well-being of workers and their families. So Joan and the group that worked on this kind of got it, and they said, well, there are really two sides to organization social responsibility, and the side that's less well understood is sort of giving back to our employees, or to put it another way, it's enabling our employees to do what many of them already want to do. They want to be good corporate citizens. I want to give back to my community. If I can do that through my employer, then first of all, that helps me fulfill. I feel better as a person. I probably feel better about my employer because my employer has helped. And I'll give you an example of an organization. I won't mention the name, but a very well-known organization that did Habitat for Humanity. And this is a call center. And call centers are call centers, and this is, I would call it, a fairly progressive organization. But it's a call center. People are always pissed off, they're regimented, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what do you think the discussion was the day after a work team went and did Habitat for Humanity? And if you're familiar with Habitat for Humanity, you go and build homes for the disadvantaged. The day after, they were sitting around talking and saying, the organization, they screw up, but honestly, their hearts are in the right place. And how cool is that? They gave us a day off with pay to go and build homes for the disadvantaged in a community. Pretty cool. If you would have tried to measure employee engagement in that moment, I bet you would have seen an uptick in engagement. So what we're saying here is that there are a number of factors that come into play that can actually, if an organization helps its employees give back to the community, you can actually achieve several things. You can improve employee engagement. If you think about a CIBC Run for the Cure, you've got people who are exercising and the physical and mental well-being that they're getting from that. So what we're saying in effect is try to tie the healthy workplace agenda and anything that an organization wants to do in the healthy workplace space to CSR, and you might actually have one budget that can actually cover all of these things. So as we say at the bottom here, CSR is very much involved. I hope no one would disagree. Entry point for workplace health and well-being, but one we don't typically think of. And of course, those who control CSR don't think, they're not healthy workplace people. That's corporate communications, or it's in the C-suite. So if we can connect those dots, it's actually a big win. So with that said, we're happy to take questions a little bit later, but I think at this point Nathan, I'll turn it back to you.
That was amazing, Alan. It's almost mind-blowing that if organizations, it might even be the case that they're already touching even on these different elements without even knowing that, and then if they could combine, like you just mentioned very recently, or maybe if they could combine their well-being with corporate responsibility in some way, shape, or form with a construct like benefiting a budget, that could be game changing for an organization.
Yeah, and the beauty is, and you're right, a lot of these activities are already happening. So it's not as if there necessarily needs to be new money. It's really new thinking, but somebody needs to be able to sort of champion this thinking within an organization and go to those who control CSR or on the other side, and basically start to connect these dots. And we're starting to see it in some leading organizations, but it's still pretty early days. So you're right. There's a lot of we think there's a lot of low hanging fruit here.
Fantastic. As Alan alluded to, if anyone has any questions related to the healthy workplace model, feel free to list them in the chat below, and then we can go back to those a little bit later on. Our collective goal can be, what questions can we create to somehow stump Alan? That is our collective goal together. So we're really going to try to test Alan and pick his brain through our questions. That's our collective goal, is how can we stump Alan and really test him about the healthy workplace model. Okay, that said, we will move on with our 2020 Joan Burton Day of Learning. And we do have to state a few changes at this moment. We did receive news last night that Anne is unable to join us today. So what we can do as a coalition is we can reschedule this aspect of today's session, and everyone who registered would automatically have free access to a later session with Anne. But what we can still do right now is we do have Mr. Jerry Kalina, who's on the call, who is involved with CCOHS, and he can still, and we'd love for him to at least perhaps share a few words right now, whether that be on CCOHS in general, whether that be on Anne. But Jerry, the floor is yours. Just unmuted your mic, so feel free to jump in at this moment.
That's great. Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Alan, for reminding us about our workplace model, reminding us about Joan and how we miss her dearly all these years. And it was interesting, Nathan, you showed a picture of her with a big smile on her face, and that is representative of the way she always was. She was always smiling and always giving, always supportive, and I think that's something that we're always going to remember her on. And she just lives on through these Joan Burton days each year, and I'm so glad that we can continue to support, her efforts, and her vision for the future. And again, I want to thank you on behalf of Anne, and I'm really sorry that she was unable to make it. She had an unfortunate accident last night, or I've been told. I wasn't even aware, and I work at CCOHS, the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, but I would like to share some of the things that Anne has been a big proponent of since she has started about a little over a year ago. She's been instrumental in change in our organization. The Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety is a relatively small organization, so some of you may relate to what we do, but we're a national organization, federal agency, reporting actually directly to Privy Council and to the Prime Minister on issues. And so we're playing a big role over the next few months with all that's happening with COVID-19, and more importantly, how we share information. And that's really what we're here to do and what we're here today to do. And one of the things I wanted to share with you was a note. It was more than a note. It was a letter to all staff about sort of the new approach for CCOHS, of what she referred to as the CCOHS Values Refresh project. CCOHS has, for many, many years, utilized the four-step, the Plan, Do, Check, Act. That's a big health and safety concept, as those of you that are in health and safety or have worked in health and safety know. This is an important concept that we use in evaluating risk, and so it's very familiar to us. But also, as we recognized it's part of what we wanted to do and what we need to do with our value proposition. And so Anne had come to us and said, you know, part of what we want to do, and part of something that Alan had talked about, is initially identify through an employee engagement survey, you know, what our you know, our employees feel about the organization and what we're doing in our mandate. We've been around for around 41 years, just celebrated 41 years in existence. Actually, we have an occupational CCOHS Act, the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety Act, that put us in place, and we're based out of Hamilton, Ontario. We only have about less than 100 employees. So we do a lot of work. Our fingers are in a lot of pies on the things that we do. So it's very important for us to have a common theme and a common approach on what we need to do to support our clients, to support our employees, to support our mandate. She talked about, and I apologize because I don't have her presentation, but I'm just sharing with you sort of the three areas that she wanted to concentrate on with this value refresh. One of them was, she put them into three phases. And the first one was really looking back, because it's important to look back before you can look ahead, to see a little bit about what the center's history was all about, and what were some of our successes that make us who we are today. And looking at some of the perception surveys that we had done, the engagement surveys we'd done in the past, and you know, how that made us who we are today. The second part of that was looking at our current reality and what we are and what we have been doing, and you know, pulling together our corporate strategic plan, identifying those elements that are you know, set our guidance and our direction. Some of the risks that we have, our strategic risks, those are critical, especially now, as you can imagine, with the current state, how a lot of our plans have had to come, business continuity plans have had to come into place to support what we're working at home. One of the areas that we really looked at was what we referred to as brand attributes. Who we are, what we do, how we communicate, you know, with each other and with our clients. And then the most recent employee engagement survey, kind of looking at all of those elements as part of this this phase one. And then the third half, the last part of this, was looking into the future. And she envisioned having employee sessions where employees could provide input and support and insight, and sort of what she referred to as a cross-sectional collaboration, so that we know that as we move forward, it's on a common theme and a common direction, and that we've included all of the employees, which was a bit of a daunting task. The second phase that we looked at, and again, this started in the fall of last year and continues right through 2020 and into 2021, was looking at all of the inputs, you know, external inputs, internal inputs, you know, who we are, who our clients are, who our customers are, you know, the union that we work with, and the important and relationship that we have with them moving forward. Government and our relationship with provincial, territorial, federal governments, and the important role that we have with them and with Canadians. So that had to be considered part of this kind of second phase. And this was the time that we would start building our value statement. And in phase two, we would include, you know, based on, and I'm looking at the 4 steps on another screen that I have, our Healthy Workplace Committee, our Occupational Health and Safety Committee, you know, our external groups and internal groups, sort of getting all of that information to be rolled up and into, you know, this new reality. of CCOHS values. We also talked to our mental health subcommittee, which is an important part of a direction that CCOHS is taking and becoming a valued source for information, as you'll find on our website. We've spent a lot of time addressing and identifying tools and information about mental health to be eventually approved by the leadership team and implemented after that. So we've had a number of things that we have been working on. Those were the first two phases. Then the last part of all of this, and again, we haven't even gotten into this yet. This is in sort of development stages, stage 3, about how do we implement and incorporate that into everything that we do, our work processes, our work structures, the relationships that we have, like Alan had talked about, performance management, and how do we include that as part of our CSR in the work that we do. So building that and those CCOHS values into this new reality is a function that we're looking at into 2020. Now again, I'm not sure how this is all going to change because of the things we've been into right now. I honestly don't know what COVID-19, what working from home is going to mean, because I do believe, this is the new reality. We are going to be working, many of us will be working remotely more often than ever before. So ensuring that we have a good core value is absolutely critical for the organization. And I think that's what Anne's vision was. And if you get an opportunity to hear her speak, she's passionate about the work that she does. She's passionate about her staff and passionate about how we support our mandate. So when this finally does happen, I'm hoping that you'll be able to be a part of that. So the work processes and structures in part 3, collaboration with again, the committees on the inside, but also with organizations that support our mandate in government, in industry, and like the coalition, getting a stronger tie there, and more importantly, the training. That is the last component that she spoke about, the importance of teaching us about, on a common theme, getting us to a level playing field about what we mean by core values. Now, I know that there were a number of things that Anne was going to talk about that I don't have with me, but I'm just sharing with you what she was talking to us about and her vision for the future for CCOHS in 2020. And I think she'll expand on that in her presentation. And I apologize, I don't have any slides to provide to you, but on the fly, I thought I needed to share this with you because I did have this values refresh document that she shared with all staff. So I kind of summarized it into this format. But Nathan, that's what I have, and I apologize I don't have any more information for you on her presentation, but I'm sure she'll be able to provide more details in when you're able to reschedule her.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. That's great. Before we move on to the next part, I'll make a few comments right now. For the OWHC, CCOHS, the Canadian Center for Occupational Health and Safety, and in addition, WSPS, Workplace Safety and Prevention Services, they are sponsors of the OWHC, so they help provide resources, provide knowledge, and other in order to help the OWHC continue to run to this day. So that's one comment. Another comment is what's amazing is actually, if anyone hasn't done it yet, the CCOHS app is actually extremely user-friendly, and I find tremendous value out of it myself. So if anyone goes to the App Store on their whether they have Apple, Android, etc., and they look up OSH answers, OSH answers, or even type in Canadian Center for Occupational Health and Safety. You'll find the app, and the app, I think it collects all the information from the website, but I find it extremely user-friendly. It's easy to see the headings. So I just find it great for glancing for information that way. In addition to that, it's, if anyone wants to learn, we've mentioned a couple times so far the idea of plan, do, check, act. That's also reflected in the National Standard of Canada for psychological health and safety in the workplace. If that might be a new terminology for individuals, essentially it is a form of continual improvement. So if anyone goes and does further research and you're looking, okay, what could this mean further? It's the idea of creating programs, but somehow having frameworks dedicated to continual improvement or a managed system. So continual improvement, managed system, those are kind of the buzzwords. And then in addition to that, since our topic today is about building sustainable workplace health programs, you could even see how, out of what Jerry just mentioned, it's the idea of how can we look back, how can we look current, and then how can we look into the future. So if we're dealing with our own organization, or if we're dealing with other organizations, and we're used to just saying, okay, what can we do next month, or what can we do 6 months from now? Maybe it's the idea of leveraging strengths from the past. And it's also the idea of, okay, let's plan for a month ahead, but then how can we plan, how can what we do a month from now leverage to what we do a year from now? And so always looking 3 steps forward instead of 1 step forward to cater to our actions, which can be made easier, as Jerry mentioned, by establishing some sort of core value. Because it's easy, isn't it, to think, hey, we could do this, we could do that. Here's a blue sky. Let's continue to ride our parachute in the blue sky. But and who knows what the right answer is, or what the right answer is for us. And the way we can do that, as Jerry mentioned, is by at least establishing what are those core values, and particularly what's that core value, and establishing programming around that. So that said, we're going to continue into the next part of our time together,